I noticed something wrong the moment I stepped outside. It wasn't a small thing, not something a man my age could brush off or forget. The space where my truck had always been, where it sat for years, rain or shine, was empty. At first, I thought maybe I had parked it farther down the driveway, or maybe one of the neighbors had borrowed it in an emergency. But the quiet stillness around me made it clear. The truck wasn't there. It was gone. I felt my pulse jump as I looked up and down the street. That truck wasn't just metal and paint. It was the last thing I still used from the days when life felt steady, and I knew I hadn't misplaced it. Someone had taken it. I called for my daughter, my voice sharper than I intended. She walked out of the house with a phone in her hand, not even glancing at the empty driveway. "Oh," she said, like she was commenting on a weather change. "I sold it this morning." My stomach dropped hard. "You sold my truck?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Without asking me?" She shrugged, her eyes still on her phone. "It was old, Dad. You don't need it anymore. And we could use the money for things around the house." Her words hit like cold water to the face. Old, unneeded, disposable. That's how she saw it. That's how she saw me. I stepped forward, searching her expression for even a flicker of understanding. But her face stayed blank, almost bored. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't explain. She didn't apologize. I took a breath that felt heavier than it should have. "There were things inside," I said. "Important things." She waved her hand without looking at me. "Whatever was in there wasn't worth keeping. The buyer didn't care, and neither should you. It's done." Her words cut deeper than she realized. She had no idea what she had tossed aside. Under that truck seat was our family Bible, a leather-bound one passed down through my mother's line. Inside it were handwritten notes, dates, memories that weren't stored anywhere else. My wife's handwriting still marked some of the pages. I kept it hidden under the seat because I didn't want it misplaced in the house. She never asked about what mattered to me. She assumed nothing did. A part of me wanted to shout, to demand she understand the value of what she had thrown into a stranger's hands. But the look on her face told me it wouldn't matter. She didn't see the truck as mine. She saw it as something she had the right to take. I felt a tightness in my chest as the reality sank in. This wasn't just about a truck. It was about a boundary she had stepped over without hesitation, a line she didn't even acknowledge existed. And standing there in the quiet space where my truck used to be, I felt something shift inside me, a suspicion I hadn't allowed myself to consider before, a fear that her decisions weren't accidents anymore. They were choices. As I turned back toward the house, a question formed in my mind, one I wasn't ready to say aloud yet, but one that demanded to be faced. What would you do if someone sold your property without asking? I sat down that evening with a heaviness I couldn't shake. The driveway looked wrong every time I glanced out the window, as if a part of my life had been carved out and taken away, without warning. Losing the truck wasn't like losing a tool or an old piece of furniture. That truck held years of my life in it. Quiet mornings, long drives with my wife before her health began to fail. Afternoons where my daughter sat beside me, asking endless questions about the world. It was the last place where our family felt whole. I bought that truck when my wife was still strong enough to help pick the color. She chose the blue because she said it reminded her of the lake where we first met. We drove it to doctor's appointments later, when walking became harder for her. And even then, she'd rest her hand on the dashboard like it was something familiar she could hold on to. After she passed, I kept driving it because it made me feel closer to her. It was one of the only things that stayed steady as the years pushed forward. My daughter knew all of that, or at least she used to. But the thing that cut deepest wasn't the truck itself. It was what she didn't bother to check before selling it. Under the seat was our family Bible, a thick leather book with creases in the cover and notes from generations before me. My grandmother wrote birth dates in the margins. My mother underlined verses she leaned on after my father died. My wife kept a small flower pressed between pages somewhere in the middle, a flower she held the day our daughter was born. I kept it under the seat so it would be safe, so it wouldn't get lost in the shuffle of things inside the house. It stayed there for years, untouched, secure, and she sold it along with everything else, without even opening the door to look. The thought hit me like a slow, painful wave. She didn't bother to check because she didn't care to. She didn't ask what mattered to me because she assumed nothing did. And that realization hurt more than the sale itself. It wasn't the first time she brushed off something important. Over the past year, I'd noticed small changes, messages left unanswered, holidays cut short, conversations where she looked past me instead of at me. Once, when I tried to show her a photo her mother loved, she told me she didn't have time for old memories. Another time, she suggested I start decluttering because it's better to get rid of things before they become a burden. Maybe that was the hint I missed. Maybe she'd already decided my belongings were hers to sort through, keep, or throw away. Sitting in my quiet living room, I began to wonder if the truck was just the beginning. She and her partner had been talking about money more often, mentioning bills, repairs, things they claimed they couldn't afford. I remembered the way he nodded approvingly when she told him she sold the truck, as if it was part of some plan they shared but never mentioned to me. A slow ache settled in my chest, a kind of grief that wasn't for the truck or even the Bible, but for the part of my daughter I no longer recognized. The distance had been growing for a while, but today it felt final. Have you ever had someone disregard something precious to you? The call came the next afternoon, right when I was trying to convince myself that maybe I was overthinking everything. I didn't recognize the number, but something in my gut told me to answer. The man on the other end sounded polite, a little unsure of himself, like he wasn't sure he had the right person. "Is this Mr. Turner?" he asked. "Yes," I said, feeling a tightness rise in my chest. "I'm the one who bought your truck yesterday. Your daughter gave me this number. I hope it's okay that I'm calling." For a moment, all I could do was steady my breath. Hearing someone else say those words, "bought your truck," made everything sting all over again. "What's this about?" I asked. "Well," he said, hesitating, "I think you might want to know that there were some personal items left in it. Important ones." His voice softened, almost careful. It seemed wrong to throw them away without asking. My heart sank. "What items?" "I found documents with your name on them, old photos, and a Bible. An old one. Looked like a family piece. I didn't want it getting damaged." For a second, the room felt like it tilted. The Bible. She hadn't even checked the seat. She didn't look, didn't care, didn't bother to see what she was giving away. The buyer kept talking, filling the silence I couldn't speak through. "Honestly, sir, I was surprised it was sold so cheap. Your daughter said it didn't run well, but I got it home and it started right up. Just needed a bit of gas. She also said it was sitting unused for years. That didn't seem true from what I saw." I closed my eyes, embarrassment rising like a slow burn under my skin. She hadn't just sold it. She had misrepresented it, undersold it, made it sound worthless so she could get it off her hands quickly. And the personal things inside, she either didn't care enough to look or didn't think they mattered. "Did she say anything else?" I asked, my voice low. "Well, her partner did most of the talking, actually. He insisted on the price and rushed the paperwork, told me not to worry about checking anything inside." That detail hit harder than I expected. I'd felt his influence creeping in for months, but hearing a stranger confirm it made everything sharper, more real. I pictured him leaning against the truck, arms crossed, telling the buyer whatever suited his needs. My daughter would have stood beside him, silent, letting him act like he had authority over something that wasn't his. The buyer continued, "I just thought you'd want these things back. I can bring them by today, if you'd like." My throat tightened. "Yes," I said softly. "Please, I'd appreciate that." After we hung up, I sat there for a long moment, hands resting in my lap, trying to steady myself. Humiliation settled in first, that heavy kind you feel when your private life is exposed by someone else's carelessness. Then heartbreak, knowing she didn't even look inside before selling something that held pieces of our family's history. But beneath those emotions, something else began to grow. A sharper edge, a deeper suspicion. If she could sell my truck this easily, what else had she been willing to sell or give away? What else had she been hiding behind those short answers and distant eyes? By the time I stood up, protective concern had replaced the confusion I'd been holding on to. This wasn't a mistake. This was the beginning of something I needed to face head on. "Would you confront your child immediately after learning this?" I waited until the buyer dropped off the Bible and documents before I opened the envelope my daughter had tossed onto my table weeks earlier. It was the renewal notice for the truck's registration, one I never responded to because I never saw it. She must have taken it from the mailbox. That realization alone made my stomach tighten. But what I found next made my hands go cold. I gathered every piece of paperwork I had left for the truck and spread them out across the kitchen table. The title, the insurance forms, the old registration cards, things I kept carefully in a small folder. As I looked through them, something felt off. The title wasn't where it usually sat. When I pulled it out, my heart sank. There was a signature on the transfer section, my signature, except it wasn't mine. The loops were wrong. The slant leaned too far. It looked like someone tried to copy it by memory, someone who thought a quick scribble would pass. I stared at it for a long moment, fear spreading slowly through me like a chill working its way up my spine. Forging a signature isn't something you do by accident. It's a choice. I checked the mailing address printed on the most recent paperwork. It wasn't my address anymore. It listed my daughter's street. I hadn't authorized that change. I hadn't even been told about it. My hands shook as I held the form closer. She, or more likely her partner, had moved all vehicle mail to their place without saying a word. I tried to calm myself, telling my thoughts to slow down, but each detail unraveled into something darker. What else had they changed? What else had they taken? I grabbed my keys and drove to the DMV. The seat beside me still holding the Bible the buyer returned. I didn't want to look at it too long. Seeing it brought back 100 memories I wasn't ready to face. The DMV clerk listened with a sympathetic look, flipping through the documents I handed her. She frowned at the title. "Sir, this signature doesn't match the one we have on your license file." She pulled up my record on the screen and turned it slightly so I could see. Side by side, the difference was undeniable. I felt heat build behind my eyes. "So, someone signed on my behalf?" I asked quietly. She nodded. "It appears that way. And the address change was done online. Usually someone uses a linked account or verification code to make changes like that." A verification code. Something you only get if you have access to someone's phone or email. I thought back to the times my daughter asked to help organize my mail. Times she had taken my phone to update apps. Times her partner lingered near my desk when I was sorting bills. Small moments I brushed off because I didn't want to believe anything was wrong. The clerk lowered her voice. "If you feel someone handled your documents without permission, you may want to talk to a legal advisor. This could be considered fraud." The word struck hard. Fraud. Against me. By my own child. As I walked out of the building, anger began replacing the fear. Not loud anger, not wild, but a deep, steady burn that told me this wasn't confusion anymore. This was betrayal, intentional and deliberate. Should family ever handle major documents without asking? I sat across from the elder abuse lawyer with a folder of documents in my lap, trying to steady my hands. I had gone over the papers again and again the night before, but seeing them under her office lights made everything feel even more real. She took her time reading each page, her expression growing more serious with every line she examined. When she finally looked up at me, there was no confusion in her eyes, only certainty. "Mr. Turner," she said carefully, "the signature on this title transfer is not yours. It's a forgery." Hearing someone else say it, someone trained to recognize these things, hit harder than when I first noticed it myself. She placed the original signature from my license file beside the forged one. Even I could see the difference clearly under the thin lamp on her desk. The pressure marks were wrong. The slant was wrong. The shape of the T wasn't even close. My chest tightened. "You're sure?" She nodded. "Yes." "And the address change connected to your vehicle? That was done through digital verification. Someone had access to your phone or email at the time." The room felt smaller. I remembered the day my daughter took my phone to fix the settings. I remembered her partner hovering nearby, watching me enter my passcode. Little things that hadn't meant much then, but now carried a weight I could barely hold. The lawyer continued. "This isn't a simple misunderstanding. This is an unauthorized transfer of property and a falsified signature. In legal terms, this is fraud, potentially elder exploitation. Your daughter and her partner had no authority to make these changes." Fury rose like a sudden flame in my chest, not the loud, shouting kind, but the deep, internal burn of someone finally understanding the truth. She didn't even tell me. She didn't ask. She just took it. The lawyer softened her voice. "I know this is extremely painful, but the law is clear. Your rights were violated, and the fact that sentimental or personal items were inside the truck only strengthens your case." I looked down at my hands, remembering the Bible the buyer returned, remembering the photos he had found stuffed in the glove box, pictures of my wife, my daughter as a child, our family when life felt whole. She hadn't looked at any of it. She hadn't cared. The lawyer slid a new set of forms toward me. "If you choose to move forward, the next steps include filing a formal complaint. That triggers a state investigation. From there, We can pursue recovery of the vehicle's value, restitution, and, if warranted, criminal charges. I swallowed hard. The words criminal charges hit with a cold finality. I didn't want to see my daughter as someone capable of this, but the paperwork in front of me said otherwise. The forged signature said otherwise. The missing Bible said otherwise. What happens if I don't file these? I asked quietly. She didn't hesitate. Then they get away with it. And in my experience, people who cross this line once rarely stop there. They usually continue. That thought tightened something deep inside me. A fear that she might already be looking for the next thing to take. My house, my accounts, my future. I picked up the pen slowly, feeling the weight of every memory we ever shared resting on my hand. Filing this complaint wasn't about revenge. It was about protection. It was about dignity. It was about stopping a line from being crossed again. When the pen finally touched the paper, I felt the shift inside me. Shock turning to fury, and fury settling into determination. Would you take legal action in this situation? I drove to their house with the folder on the seat beside me, the same seat where the Bible used to rest under the truck's cushion. Every mile tightened something inside my chest. The lawyer's words echoed in my mind. Fraud, unauthorized transfer, exploitation. I wasn't going there to yell. I wasn't going there for answers I already knew. I was going because the truth needed to be said to their faces. When my daughter opened the door, her expression shifted from surprise to irritation in a heartbeat. Her partner stepped behind her, arms folded like he was guarding the entrance. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but heavy. Her partner laughed under his breath. "If this is about that old truck again," I held up the title transfer. "This is about the signature you forged." My daughter's eyes flicked to the paper, then back to me. Instead of guilt, I saw something colder, defiance. "Dad, you're overreacting. You probably forgot signing it." I opened the folder and placed the DMV copy beside it. The DMV verified it. A handwriting expert confirmed it. "This isn't mine." I tapped the forged line. "And you know it." Her partner stepped forward, his tone sharp. "You're confused. You should be thanking us for handling things you couldn't keep up with." His words hit harder than the signature itself. "You didn't handle anything," I said. "You stole from me. You lied. And you used my age as an excuse." My daughter crossed her arms. "So what? It was just a truck. You didn't need it anymore." I felt something inside me crack, not anger, but sorrow so deep it nearly buckled my legs. "You didn't check inside it," I said quietly. "You didn't look under the seat. You didn't care what was in there. You didn't care what mattered to me." She shifted her weight, but her face didn't soften. "We needed money. It's not a big deal." Her partner muttered, "He'll get over it." "No," I said, "not this time." The knock on the door cut through the tension. 2 officers stood on the porch. I had asked the detective handling my case if they could be present for this conversation, not to intimidate, but to protect the truth when it finally surfaced. The officers stepped inside calmly. "We're here to take statements regarding a reported fraudulent transfer of property," one said. "We need to speak with both of you." My daughter's face drained. Her partner's smirk fell away. "You called the police on your own family?" he snapped. I felt the weight of the moment settle over me. "I didn't call them on my family," I said quietly. "My family wouldn't have done this." One officer asked them to sit. Another took out a recorder. As questions began, about signatures, access codes, online changes, I watched their confidence crumble. They blamed each other, stumbling over their own words, denying what the documents already proved. My daughter muttered, "I can't believe you're doing this," her voice shaking with anger, not remorse. "You did this," I answered softly. "I'm just finally facing it." As the officers finished their statements and explained the next steps, case file continuation, evidence review, possible charges, I stood by the doorway, feeling both vindicated and hollow. This wasn't the justice I ever wanted, but it was the justice that was left. When I walked back to my car, the evening air felt somber, almost heavy. A part of me grieved for what I had lost, the trust, the bond, the daughter I thought I still knew. But another part of me stood a little straighter, knowing this was the first real step toward protecting what remained of my life. Does their reaction sound like innocence to you? The courthouse felt colder than it should have. Even with the morning sun coming through the tall windows, I sat beside my attorney while she reviewed the files one last time, her calm voice steadying my nerves. She leaned closer and reminded me of the charges being presented: property theft, signature forgery, digital fraud, and elder exploitation. Hearing those words laid out so plainly made my stomach twist, but it also grounded me in the truth of what had happened. Nothing about this was a misunderstanding. It was deliberate. It was wrong. When the bailiff called our case, we stood and walked forward together. My daughter and her partner were already seated at the defense table. My daughter kept her eyes on the floor. Her partner tried to look confident, but his foot tapping under the table betrayed him. Neither of them glanced in my direction, and I wasn't sure whether that made things easier or harder. The judge began by reviewing the charges, his voice firm and level. Each count felt like a weight dropping into the room, forcing everyone to face the reality of what they had done. This case involves the unauthorized sale of a motor vehicle, he said, the forging of legal documents, and the exploitation of an elderly individual. The last phrase hit with a quiet force I wasn't prepared for. Hearing myself described as an elderly individual hurt in a way I didn't expect, but it was the truth the law needed to speak. The prosecution called the investigator first. He explained how the complaint had been filed, how the evidence aligned, how every step led back to their decisions. Then the DMV official testified about the forged signature and the unauthorized address change. She spoke clearly, showing the two signatures side by side. Even from several feet away, the differences were obvious. My daughter's jaw tightened, and her partner stared straight ahead, like the floor might swallow him if he blinked. When the handwriting expert took the stand, my chest tightened. He pointed out pressure marks, slant errors, and hesitation patterns in the forged signature. This was not written by Mr. Turner, he said plainly. It appears to have been copied by someone who was unfamiliar with his natural writing rhythm. That sentence felt like a door closing, a clear, undeniable confirmation that what happened wasn't a mistake. My attorney presented the photos of the truck, the buyer's statement, and the list of sentimental items recovered. She explained how the Bible, letters, and family documents had been left inside because no one checked. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't need to. The facts were painful enough. When the defense spoke, their arguments were thin. My daughter claimed she thought she had verbal permission. Her partner tried to shift blame to her. Their words didn't match their earlier confidence, and each denial felt more desperate than the last. It was hard to watch, not because I doubted the truth, but because I mourned the child I once knew, the one who used to run to me with scraped knees and tearful apologies. Now she wouldn't even look at me while defending the choices she made. The judge listened without interruption. When both sides finished, he folded his hands and spoke with a calm gravity that filled the room. "This court recognizes the severity of exploiting a parent's trust," he said. "The harm done here is both financial and emotional, and it reflects a complete disregard for the dignity and well-being of the victim." Hearing him say those words felt like something lifting off my shoulders, a validation I didn't know I needed. It wasn't joy, it wasn't triumph. It was something gentler, something closer to relief. The judge then outlined the next steps towards sentencing and restitution. He made it clear that consequences were coming, and that the law would not overlook what they had done. As we left the courtroom, a quiet grief settled in me. Grief for the past, for what we had been, and for what was lost. But there was vindication too, and in that mix of pain and clarity, I felt a small part of myself begin to heal. Do you think the court handled this fairly? The final hearing felt quieter than the earlier ones, as if everyone in the room already knew the outcome before the judge spoke. I sat with my attorney while my daughter and her partner were brought in. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in the way someone does when the weight of their choices finally settles on their shoulder. Her partner avoided looking at anyone at all. The judge reviewed the findings once more, his tone steady and controlled. He ordered restitution for the value of the truck and the personal items, mandatory financial oversight classes for my daughter, and probation with strict reporting requirements. Her partner faced a harsher penalty, community service, financial penalties, and a fraud prevention program. The judge emphasized the seriousness of exploiting an elderly parent, making it clear the law would not excuse their actions simply because we shared blood. When the gavel came down, there was no satisfaction in me, just a quiet acceptance. Justice had moved, slow but steady, and it had done what it could. Some losses can't be repaired by courts, some wounds don't close with sentencing, but the truth had finally been spoken aloud, and that mattered. When I returned home that evening, The first thing I did was go to the shelf where I had placed the Bible after the buyer returned it. I opened the cover and ran my fingers along the worn pages, feeling the impressions left by the hands of my mother, my wife, and generations before them. Finding it again felt like reclaiming a piece of the life I thought I had lost for good. But even as I held it, I knew something inside me had changed. The relationship I once had with my daughter wasn't just cracked, it was gone, at least for now, maybe forever. And for the first time, I allowed myself to say that without guilt. You cannot force love into a space where respect no longer lives. I thought of the things we carry as we age, memories, values, the small traditions that keep us grounded. Dignity becomes one of those things, maybe the most important of all. And dignity is something you have to protect, even when the threat comes from someone you raised. Especially then. I walked to the backyard and sat on the old bench my wife used to favor. The air was cool, and the quiet wrapped around me like a long overdue rest. I thought about boundaries, not as walls to keep others out, but as lines that remind us who we are and what we will no longer accept. My daughter had crossed those lines, not once, but many times, and I had finally stopped pretending it was something less than betrayal. There is peace in acceptance, even when it hurts. I don't know if she will ever understand what she took, not just from the truck or the Bible, but from our relationship. I don't know if she cares to, but I know this. I'm still here. I still have my memories, my home, my integrity, and I still have the right to protect my life from those who would treat it carelessly. As the sky darkened, I closed the Bible gently. Forgiveness is a question I may never fully answer, but moving forward with clarity, that at least is mine to decide. Would you forgive a child who sold something precious without asking?